At the moment, the MK party seems to be in shambles. It's got a lot of internal strife. Wouldn't that make a difference?
Yes, it would make a difference. But the one thing they've got, which keeps them glued together, which provides the cohesion, is a man called Jacob Zuma. I mean, MK entered politics without a manifesto, without a constitution, without elected leadership, and all those kind of things. It is a weak point, but it is also their strength, that Jacob Zuma is the glue that keeps them together. You will remember that when COPE started, they had a similar problem. They had a leadership contestation right from the beginning. Shilowa and Terra Lakota just couldn't get eye to eye. Eventually, that leadership was the breakout of COPE, and what seemed to be a political party that is there for the long term with a sustainable kind of approach just fell apart. Today, it's a micro party with one or two representatives, and it all started with leadership. Now, that is in MK at the moment, and we saw over the last 2 weeks letters being written, accusations being made, because the leadership is not elected. It seems to me, if I listen to Jacob Zuma's daughter, the leadership in MK is kind of like in a fiefdom or in a tribe where the king and the son of the king takes over. It's not as if it's democratically elected. That, of course, is very close to what Zuma is doing. Zuma is playing Zulu nationalism, and he's playing it hard, and he's playing it directly. And I think that if you look at the disbursement of Zulu-speaking people in South Africa, and you look at a map, you'll see the whole of KwaZulu-Natal is Zulu-speaking, and then it goes up and into the eastern part of the Free State, a little bit of Mpumalanga, into the southern portions of Gauteng. Those are areas where Zulu-speaking people are fairly dominant. And if you now take that little picture back to the 2021 conflicts, you will see where the conflicts were and where they were strongest. And I think that is where MK will also show their strongest support. In other words, portions of the Free State, portions of Mpumalanga, portions of Gauteng, and a large portion of KwaZulu-Natal. And I think that is the big challenge. And then they would like, after the election, to have a conference, to have elections, and these kind of things. I think they're barking up a very, very difficult tree with the way in which they put the cart before the horse. But I think MK will have a history very similar to COPE. That is, that it is a one-election party with a very, very small chance of a sustainable approach after the election.
Well, that's an interesting prediction about the end of Zuma eventually.
Yeah, because the party is built around Zuma. You will see all the political parties that was built around individuals. And the exception is, and I was wrong, I was also of the opinion that once Mangosuthu Buthelezi dies, the IFP will die. Well, I was completely wrong. The IFP has actually shown like a phoenix. It emerged out of ashes. At one point, it only had about 10 or 12% of the vote in KwaZulu-Natal. It is back to about 20-24% of the vote. So there's a real growth. And, of course, what they're doing, they are using Buthelezi as the face of the party. So in his demise, in his death, he is making a huge contribution in terms of what goes on there, almost like Lady Di. In her death, she had an impact on the royalty, changes in the royal house that she would never have while being alive. It's a pity that she died the way she did, but the changes came after her death. And I think what Buthelezi did after his death, he gave a new injection of political life into the IFP.
Yeah, brilliant. What do you guys think? in this analysis anyway, I thought that we could understand what makes Jacob Zuma still popular as a black liberation fighter in Africa, especially in South Africa, and what really does he represent even at his age of 83, and what keeps him strong and going in the black liberation movement in Africa. So I found a really interesting research on, on the conversation that speaks about how some theories that explain why Jacob Zuma could actually still be popular as a black liberation fighter in South Africa. So it says about how a number of theories have been touted in South Africa about why and how former President Jacob Zuma retains his popularity as a leader in South Africa, and why the party he formed, the MK Party, or popularly known as the Umkhonto we Sizwe Party, why the party he formed to contest the recent elections managed to get 14.58% of the vote in the national elections, and also 45.35% in the provincial elections in KwaZulu-Natal, to become the largest party in KwaZulu-Natal. This is just over 5 months of its launch. So it only launched the party 5 months. After just after 5 months, it actually gained this whole popularity. So just after 5 months of existence and really sprouting, especially in a very powerful vociferous campaign in South Africa, it got, at the end of the day, close to 15% of the electorate. South Africa has a 60 million population, so 15% of that is a lot. We know that the ANC had 40 thereabouts percent, but 15% is a lot, and it became the third largest party after the Democratic Alliance Party, in South Africa. So Jacob Zuma's comeback was something that was welcome. It felt like something that was being a time bomb that was actually waiting to explode. And we also saw that in the provincial side, where the MK Party got a 45.35% of the electorate. So at the end of the day, it might end up controlling this popular city called KwaZulu-Natal that controls a lot of really important ports in South Africa and determines the weight of South Africa's economy. So the research continues that saying that, but all conjecture, all explanations need to be treated with extreme cautions on why Jacob Zuma is still popular. It says that this is because nobody really knows. But based on 5 decades immersed in South Africa's politics, especially, this researcher now speaks about how that they will argue that there's no easy explanation for Umkhonto we Sizwe's unexpected popularity. It also says that there's a similar dissonance 14 years ago when Zuma defeated the African National Congress President Thabo Mbeki at a watershed party conference in December 2007. He speaks about how, at the time, the lack of consensus amounted into total confusion and a fear that South Africa was confronting an abyss at that time during the defeat of Thabo Mbeki by Jacob Zuma. It also speaks about how that in trying to understand the reasons why Jacob Zuma still remains popular in South Africa, many have proposed the theory that Jacob Zuma is South Africa's Donald Trump. Okay, it says that the first theme running through much analysis is that we might see Jacob Zuma as Donald Trump, the former US president who is prepared to cause political mayhem to keep himself out of jail. It says that this suggests that, fearing the end of the road after constantly appealing adverse court decisions to avoid prosecution for corruption, Jacob Zuma has played an ace in a deadly game of poker with the ANC. Whereas Trump has captured the machinery and followership of the Republican Party from within, MK Party, by the leadership of Jacob Zuma, Jacob Zuma claims MK Party is essentially the true ANC, which has been betrayed by those who ejected him from the presidency in 2018. So this is another argument. A lot of people actually say that the ANC actually has a lot of MK Party supporters already still representing ministers in the ANC. And if there's anything that goes shaky within the ANC, so the ANC, even the ANC itself, led by Cyril Ramaphosa, is divided. In the event of any shake-up, many of the members of the ANC would simply move to the MK Party, making the MK Party, and especially Jacob Zuma, who might, a much more powerful figure in South Africa, you see. So it speaks about how Donald Trump also claims that the 2020 election in the United States was rigged by Joe Biden and the shadowy deep state political elite. Zuma depicts the Electoral Commission of South Africa as having fixed the 2024 election in favor of the ANC to keep President Cyril Ramaphosa in power. And Donald Trump threatens that his being sent to jail following his recent conviction as a felon would lead to a popular uprising. Jacob Zuma also warns obliquely that any attempt to prevent the MK party from assuming power in KwaZulu-Natal would lead to violence. So this report is actually comparing Donald Trump and Jacob Zuma as one theory that still explains why Jacob Zuma seems to be still appealing to South Africans. Okay. It also speaks about that all this and much more as parallels between Trump and Zuma are reiterated. For added spice, Trump's personal antagonism to Biden is matched with Zuma's personal anger with Ramaphosa, who displaced him. Now, in terms of ethnicity, another theory says that a second major theme running through much analysis is that MK party's unexpected strong performance can be explained by Zuma's appeal to Zulu nationalism or ethnicity. This territory is a conceptual swap. Zuma's popularity and MK party's strong performance in KwaZulu-Natal indicate that they have successfully appealed to aspects of Zulu culture, history, and exceptionalism to get support from ordinary people in KwaZulu-Natal, just as the late Mangosuthu Buthelezi and the Inkatha Freedom Party did before them. But there are always pitfalls in any reference to ethnicity. Key among these is the problem of who has the ethnicity and who does not. An implicit suggestion often being that Africans have it and whites do not. So this research argues that the conceptual term ethnicity is something that's being owned by Africans and not white people. Okay, it also goes at saying that as with other terms which are often bandied about to explain the popularity of particular individuals feared by liberal elite, notably populism and charisma, using it too loosely exhausts its explanatory power. So in short, if we want to use ethnicity as an explanation for Zuma's popularity in KwaZulu-Natal, we would need to explain why he appeals to some Zulus and not others. Equally, we need to explain why Zuma remains popular among segments of the electorate across the nation, far beyond the boundaries of KwaZulu-Natal. And this can hardly be ascribed to ethnicity. So ethnicity could be something that we might rule out in our explanation of Zuma's popularity still in South Africa. Now, in terms of the coalition of the aggrieved, so there's a coalition of the aggrieved people in South Africa. It says that the third suggestion sees Umkhonto we Sizwe's rise as the product of a coalition of the aggrieved in South Africa, and that those who have felt sidelines by Ramaphosa's government are the ones who are represented by this coalition of the aggrieved. We also saw something like the likes of the multi-party Tata or the Moonshot Pact by these smaller parties who came together to try to unseat the ANC from power. So this might be one of those people that are really described by the coalition of the aggrieved. So it speaks about how when Zuma was elected party leader, the Trade Union Federation, COSATU, and the South African Communist Party, driven by their opposition to Mbeki's neoliberal economic policies, joined hands with aspirant entrepreneurial elites who felt that they had been excluded from the fruit of black economic empowerment. So BEE, Black Economic Empowerment in South Africa, was a policy instituted by the African National Congress, ANC, to sort of like begin the realignment of the historical injustice that the apartheid regime and even the pre-apartheid regime, the a government led by the whites, impacted on black South Africans. Okay, so it speaks about how in the 2024 election, Zuma's coalition of support is said to have drawn heavily from those who were fingered as involved in corruption by the Zondo Commission, which probed state capture, and they might have lost state contract or fear prosecution. So as a result of that, they ended up belonging to a large portion of supporters for Jacob Zuma. Now, finally, it says that another way to understand the reason why Jacob Zuma seems to be appealing and still maintains his popularity in South Africa, despite his age and despite, how long he's been in, the political space within the MK party, can be explained also from the notion that Zuma and Umkhonto we Sizwe's policy, embodies an attack on the constitution and constitutionalism. So we know that the MK party, led by Jacob Zuma, wants to abolish the constitution of South Africa, for reasons not really clear. He says that This researcher speaks about how that he observed that Zuma's tsunami or Zuma's ascendancy has opened the Pandora box, and it gave rise to a style and content of politics which are not merely vulgar and disrespectful to ANC traditions, but explicitly dangerous to democracy. It appeals to a social conservatism which is hostile to values of the Constitution of South Africa, and speaks about how linked to this notion of Zuma himself as a politically unprincipled and cynically disposed to exploit his popular appeal for personal ends. You see, so these are some of the arguments that have really been put forward to try to explain why Zuma remains popular in South Africa, as a black liberation fighter. We know that Jacob Zuma played a huge role in the black liberation movement against apartheid regime in South Africa, and his rise to power following the demise of Thabo Mbeki's regime, in South Africa. But now, after being out of power since 2028, when Cyril Ramaphosa replaced him, his comeback only within 5 months proved that there was a certain force within the political landscape of South Africa that still hungers for Jacob Zuma. And this might be sort of like many see it as a threat, because Jacob Zuma is opposed to the South African constitution, and he also wants to introduce more indigenous African knowledge systems into governance and leadership in South Africa, which is a really racially multiracial society in that regard. And so that could define a new way of top-down approach, a new kind of like indigenous colonialism to the people who make up modern South Africa. So a really complicated state South Africa is, in its state of blackness and non-raciality. But what do you guys think about this speech? Share your thoughts in the comments.